Alright, so today I want to give you some tips and tricks for breeding ball pythons. I actually started breeding ball pythons about 5 years ago, and I've gone through quite a bit from the beginning all the way up to now. I pretty much consider myself a hobbyist breeder. I produce about 100 hatchlings a year. Sometimes I'll produce anywhere from 90 to about 100 hatchlings. This year it looks like I might only produce about 50, having a pretty bad year breeding ball pythons. When I first started breeding, I actually started with just snakes in general. I had an Australian Woma python, I had some king snakes and a bunch of other snakes. I had a couple of reticulated pythons, and then I went to my very first reptile show, the NARBC in Tinley Park. And let me tell you, that opened my eyes. It was pretty amazing. It was like out of all the tables at the reptile show, it seemed like everybody was crowding around the ball python tables. I was like, what is going on with the ball pythons? Come to find out, with ball pythons, there's the most number of genes out of pretty much all animals and all reptiles that I know of. And kind of the cool thing about ball pythons is that when you take a multi-gene animal and you breed it to something else, you can breed out all the individual genes in their pure form, which is pretty amazing that you can actually do that. I don't know of any other animal where you can, like dogs, once you make a mixed breed, you really can't get the purebred AKCs back out of that out of that mixed breed. It's pretty amazing with ball pythons. And I think that is the number one thing that really sets ball pythons apart from all the other reptiles and all the other animals in general. Pretty amazing. And then when I found that out and I started in ball pythons, I was pretty much obsessed over ball pythons. I was buying, I pretty much got rid of all my other snakes and went pretty much solely to ball pythons. I kept my 2 reticulated pythons and kind of switched my collection, and then I started buying into a lot of different projects. And pretty much, you go through this phase right at the beginning where you're really obsessed and you're buying the racks and the snakes, and you're like, buy, let's break the bank and buy as much as we can. And it's kind of interesting. I see everybody kind of go through this transition from the very beginning, just starting out in ball pythons. And then I got to the point where I got about 2 years down the road, and then I quickly realized that it takes about 3 or 4 years for a ball python female to mature to the point where she'll actually lay some eggs. So you get a couple of years down the road, and then you quickly realize that, hey, I'm not making any money. I'm spending all my money on my snakes, and it's kind of a drain on the budget. And then what I did is, after about 2 years, I switched and I bought some mature adult females. I found a guy that had a whole collection of females that were ready to breed, 3 years old. And I was thinking he probably got to the point where I did, where he's putting all his money into the snakes with no return. He just wanted to get out of it. And it was probably the wrong time to get out of it, because let me tell you, I really did pretty well with those females. So I bought like 8 or 9 females, and then I bought Bobby here. Bobby is my bamboo ball python, and he was like my first real purchase as far as breeding, a male into a whole bunch of, I think I had like a bunch of normal females, and I had some pinstripes and some lemon blasts. It wasn't really high in females, but they were all ready to breed, which is pretty awesome. And that very first year I produced, I think it was like almost 120 hatchlings out of all the snakes that I had. It was pretty incredible. I actually bought some other ones over on Morphmarket. I actually had 2 really big het caramel albinos that were almost 5,000 grams, really big monster females. And then I bought it was my pastel calico female, which was really big. And let me tell you, those can lay, clutches of like 13 eggs, which is pretty insane. So I ended up with like over 100 hatchlings. And let me tell you get to the point where you're like investing and going crazy and being obsessed over buying and buying and buying. And then when you hit your first big year, you kind of get out of that phase where you're like, I have so many snakes, I don't really need to buy any anymore. It's kind of a weird transition. And then you pretty much get to the point where I'm at right now, where you get to the point where you pretty much have your whole room full of really awesome snakes, and then you're producing even better ones every year. And I got to the point where I don't really want to expand my collection. I kind of want to just stay as a hobbyist breeder, producing maybe between 100, maybe 200 hatchlings a year at the most. Let me tell you, if it's more than that, I'd probably have to hire someone to help me, and I don't want to really get to that point where I really, kind of expand it like a whole business operation. I've seen some people go into, they kind of go into the pet store area where they start a pet store. I've seen that. I've seen some people decide, all right, I'm just going to make a whole warehouse of snakes and hire a whole bunch of employees and just sell thousands of snakes over here. There's a lot of different ways that you can get into it. And I pretty much decided I just want to stay pretty much as a small time breeder and maybe get a couple more racks, but I don't really want to expand too much. And kind of the hard part about that is I produce really awesome hatchlings every year. And then the problem is you kind of get attached to all the snakes in your collection. So for example, Bobby here around my neck, you know, you name them, and it's a matter of fact, like some of them can become almost part of the family. You get really attached to them. And then you have some really awesome hatchlings that you want to hold back. And a lot of times you go through this dilemma, especially, I'd say, especially if you have kids and the kids get attached to all the snakes. And then of course you can't sell, you know, you can't sell your favorite, you know, your kid's favorite snake to kind of replace it with another one. So you kind of have a choice, either sell all the hatchlings that you produce, or you can expand your collection, or, you know, sometimes I've actually seen some people where they just sell all the hatchlings and their collection is kind of stuck at the original, the original gene pool that they originally started with, and that can be kind of difficult too. So probably if I was to do it again, what I'd probably do is I'd probably not buy so many snakes at the very beginning. I'd probably start with fewer higher end snakes is the way I do it. I'd probably, you know, invest in like $1,000 snake or like a $15 snake. Matter of fact, right from the beginning, I'd probably get a female, you know, a couple of really high end females and just sit on them for a few years and kind of slowly get into it that way. But let me tell you, you kind of go through that obsession at first where you're just buying everything you can. And I kind of got to the point where I definitely don't name and get attached to a lot of my snakes. I say pretty much the only snake that I'm really attached to is Bobby here around my neck, so that's kind of cool. So that's kind of my transition, kind of the initial, kind of the craze that you go through, and then kind of being overwhelmed by all the hatchlings, and then you get to the point where you have to find that equilibrium of buying or, you know, producing and selling. And what I've pretty much done is I produce quite a bit in my collection, and then every year what I do is I actually buy into one new project that has some new genes that I don't have in my collection, or some really high-end snakes. So what I'll do is I'll spend, you know, just enough to actually, you know, sell all my hatchlings, and then I'll get a lot of money from that, and then I'll reinvest in usually just one really high-end snake of, you know, it depends on your budget and kind of where you are. As a matter of fact, the last one I spent about $1,500 on my banana inchy clown, hoping for some really awesome clown stuff. And then this next year, I'm thinking maybe of getting into like an acid or a confusion project or static or something like that to kind of add to the collection and kind of keep boosting it. The problem is if you get too many genes and too many really awesome, you know, hatchlings, then it's always a challenge. What do I hold back? Because everything is awesome. I don't really want to expand my collection. I kind of want to keep it small in just a small space. I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge, trying to figure out where you want to go with your reptile business once you start getting into it. If you want to expand, or if you want to just kind of sell and kind of upgrade, or yeah, it can get pretty confusing. And kind of the other thing I did pretty much at the beginning is I started breeding rodents, and I found out really quick that really the ball python hatchlings really need live mice at the very beginning to get them going. And that is another thing. If you actually get into rodents and breeding rodents, that can be another, I would say it's kind of a time-consuming project on the side that it's kind of a double-edged sword. As a matter of fact, if I was to kind of expand my operation and do snakes kind of full-time, what I would probably do is I would find someone local that was focused on breeding rodents and buy all the live rodents from that person instead of breeding my own, because I think your time's probably better spent, you know, breeding ball pythons. I think you'd make more money than breeding rodents. But it's kind of funny because rodents is almost the component that you need for some of your ball pythons. The hatchlings need the live mouse hoppers, and then some ball pythons will only eat the live rats, which is kind of maddening. I have some that will eat live only. I've tried everything, and sometimes you just cannot get them over. And sometimes you have some that are just like stuck on African softwares or something like that. So I'd say probably, you know, half my time, you know, probably at least half my time working here in the reptile room is going through all these rodents every week and changing out the bedding and giving them food and water, which is kind of a bummer. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about maybe reducing the number of rodents here in my collection to try to kind of reduce that down so it's not, you know, so much. I really don't need this many rodents. I pretty much feed 100% from what I'm producing here in my collection. So that is pretty much it. Those are my thoughts and kind of the progression from the beginning all the way up to 5 years. And who knows where I'm going to be in the next 10 years or 20 years where this is going to go. It's kind of a crazy ride, and you never know. You kind of get into some of these things, and sometimes, you know, you start thinking, wouldn't it be nice to hire like 5 or 6 people and then really expand it, have all of those guys take care of all the kind of the day-to-day work, and then I can do like YouTube videos about all the new stuff that hatching out or something like that. Who knows where it's going to go. There's a lot of possibilities working with ball pythons. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.